Welcome to the garden. I am so excited that you're here with me today. We have a really awesome video in store for you. I'm going to give you a tour of my back garden and patio, as well as share a couple tips for potting up some seedlings using some materials that you might find in your recycling bin. So let's go ahead and hop right into the video. Hi, welcome to my garden. Today we're gonna explore the garden and we're gonna talk about starting seeds. We're gonna get some seedlings started. We're gonna start them inside and then talk about our garden plan for the spring. So, I'm pretty new to this house. Most of this landscaping is existing. So we're just gonna work around sort of the existing landscaping and really enhance it with some great fruits, veggies, and some native pollinator flowers. So I did already put one flower in the ground up here. Doesn't look like much now. It loses all of its foliage in the winter. But we have a Joe Pivy, which is going to be a beautiful, tall, pink-flowered pollinator flower that bumblebees love. That's going to attract some of the native bees, and it's also really great at absorbing water. So we're going to have that flower growing there. We've got two garden beds behind me, over here and over here. And the main function that I'm hoping to get out of these are vegetable gardens and herb gardens. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about my ideas for garden planting. A lot of our full sun plants, we're going to want to plant here. We get good morning sun in this direction. But over here we get really good morning and afternoon sun. So I'm thinking my sun-loving plants like my zucchini squash, tomatoes are going to do really well in these beds, as well as in the early spring we'll start with some lettuces and more of the green plants that are a little bit more cold hardy. While we're starting indoors, our tomato seeds and our sun-loving plants that are really going to blossom and bloom in the summer. We have already some herbs here, so we've got a lovely rosemary and a lavender plant there. And there's a little bit of ivy, so we do have a bit of like an invasive plant situation, but we're just going to kind of manage it. Hi! How are you? Good. We're just taking a tour around the garden. Okay, so we've got a little bit of English ivy here, which isn't invasive, but we're just kind of manage for it. We can't really do anything to get rid of it. I'm gonna hold for car noises. And then we'll get
There's so many noises.
Welcome to urban gardening, folks. There are all kinds of friends, neighbors, cars, planes, trains, every noise, we've got it. So there's some little English ivy on that back fence. We're just gonna try and manage for it, make sure it doesn't get too out of control. I can't actually remove it, I'm just renting here, but we're gonna try to do the best that we can to make sure that it doesn't take over. We also have a ginormous mint plant in the corner there that you'll see in a couple months. So lots of great cocktails and other things coming soon. Pro tip is that if you do have a mint plant, keep it in a container, even if you plant it in the ground, because otherwise it will spread and get enormous. So I would not recommend planting mint in your garden beds, but as it is existing, we're just gonna love it where it is. So some of the plans for exciting things that we'd like to add this year are some wildflowers. You can see that there's a bit of a border around the grass here, just a mulch border. In order to not have to do a lot of work suppressing weeds and other things, and also to really boost the production out of our vegetable beds, we're going to do some pollinator attracting flowers along the edges of the garden beds. We'll do some spring plants here, as well as maybe some annual flowers, maybe another small bush, a third small bush to kind of even out this area here, and some lower ground cover. And then on this wall behind me, if you can imagine, giant 6 foot, 7 foot tall sunflowers in every color, from yellow to the dark red, almost purple color. I've got a bunch of varieties of sunflowers that I'm so excited to share with you, and hopefully we'll be able to cover up some of these less beautiful air conditioning units and just have a beautiful floral backdrop here. So some sunflowers here. We might do another native annual plant here. We already have some existing black-eyed Susans. They get to be about this high. They're pretty well established and big plants, but we could use, there were some hostas or something I think that died that were here, so we can replace those with some nice native plants that are going to be, you know, another medium-sized bushy plant to have some great flowers, as well as to have those additional benefits for wildlife. Hi, welcome. So, welcome to the garden. I'm so excited to be here. It is the beginning of our planting season, and I'm so excited to talk to you about seed start. Let's actually just do a quick fun fact about tomatoes. So in case you are unfamiliar with planting tomatoes, or you have maybe tried but not had so much great success, I have struggled over the past few years to plant tomatoes, mostly because I was only planting in containers, and I think that they really prefer to be somewhere where they can be deeply rooted. So I have this really adorable hip clip. I'll try and insert an image of it if it doesn't come up on the screen. From Beat Street Gardens, which is a really great organization here in DC. It's really like an intergenerational garden. There's some great seniors who are sharing their wisdom with the younger generations about gardening, and I got this from them 2 years ago at Rooting DC. So yeah, this is a great little care guide, and it's got just a couple fun facts. So in case you didn't know, tomatoes, you actually can, when you have well-established seedlings and you're ready to plant them out, take off the bottom couple of leaves, and you want to plant them deeply so that the bottom part of the stem is actually covered in soil. You'll actually grow more roots and have a deeper root system if you plant them out that way. And the deeper the root system, taller and healthier the plant. So that's another little quick tip for you, is to deeply plant your tomatoes and get a couple inches of the green part of the stem underneath the ground, take the leaves off, and then you'll sprout more roots from that stem. We are going to plant them rather tightly in this egg container, but obviously as they grow they're going to need to be spaced out, so I'll show you along that process as they grow as well. Tomatoes are full sun. They love the sun, but you also have to make sure that they get sufficient moisture so that they don't overheat or dry out. This was an issue that I had last year. I was planting in containers and they just got so hot, and I didn't have running water in the place where I was gardening, so I was carrying out pail and pail after pail of water to try and water them in the dead of the summer when we had 90 and 100-degree temperatures. Luckily, I've got much better gardening infrastructure in my new apartment, which I'm thrilled about. And I have a hose and we have irrigation, and I'm actually going to be able to take much better care of my plants here, so I'm so thrilled about that. So we'll get into kind of more of those growing tips later on. So the last tip that I wanted to share with you here is actually that tomatoes and basil are really great companion plants. I'll insert something in the link below about what companion planting is. Maybe I'll throw something up on the blog about it so that you can read a little bit more. But I'm really going to work this year towards embracing natural systems and bringing together plants that love to be together, plants that are friends. And plants that are friends with tomatoes are different types of basil. So thinking about planting out basil with your tomato plants is going to help to increase your production and help to really have your plants flourish this year. So with that said, let's get started with some potting up. All right, let's get into planting these seedlings, getting these seedlings started. So what are the things that you're going to need to start seedlings? Obviously, you're going to need your seeds, for one. So today I'm going to start some tomato seeds. One of my major goals for the year is to try and grow all of my own tomatoes. And if I'm lucky enough to have a big bumper crop come fall, I want to learn how to can tomatoes so I can save all those extra delicious homegrown tomatoes to have to eat throughout the winter as well. So I have several different varieties of tomatoes that I'm growing. This one is the heirloom tomato brandywine, just a seed pack that I got in my local garden shop. And we are going to get started. You're going to need some seeds. You're going to need some sort of a tray to plant them in. If you don't have egg cartons, I think you could also use leftover takeout containers. You could use really anything. If you have those ice cream containers, those little pints that they sell of like Ben & Jerry's, or whatever your poison is, those would make great potting up containers for seedlings. Any sort of like old plastic containers, if you poke some holes in the bottom of them so that they have some drainage, all of those could work. I really like to use egg cartons. A, because it's cheap. B, because it's a material that is gonna biodegrade and break down. So I actually could pot up the entire little cup, and in fact what I intend to do is start my seedlings in these containers, and then once they're big enough to transplant into bigger containers, I'll just kind of cut along the borders of each one to separate each of the seedlings and put them in their own separate nursery pot. So that's kind of the plan for these guys. But of course, if you don't have these, I don't eat eggs, but I was able to get these from my neighbor, so I'm really grateful about that. But if you don't have access to these, just use whatever you have. Obviously, if you have a styrofoam egg container, that also works the exact same way, but you won't want to plant the styrofoam directly into the ground in your garden or into your nursery pot, because the roots won't be able to get through it. It won't break down the same way paper will. So you'll have to actually scoop them out of the styrofoam egg container and put them into their new container or into the ground in the garden. So far we said you're gonna need seeds. You're gonna need a container. You're gonna want your container to have some sort of drainage. Cardboard is pretty breathable, but you could also use, like I said before, something plastic and just poke some holes in the bottom. Drainage is super important. You don't want your seeds to be overly... September. Hey. Come on. All right, so you're gonna need your seeds. You're gonna need your seed container where you're gonna plant them. You're gonna need some sort of drip tray. That's what I'm using my cake pan for. And you're gonna need some soil. So I'm just using an organic potting mix that I got from my local garden shop. It's not anything special or anything that I would necessarily recommend. I do prefer an organic potting mix to your more standard potting mix that's going to have some chemical fertilizers in it, because I just prefer to know what the inputs are going into the food that I eat. And I feel a little bit more comfortable with things that have that organic seal. Alright. So. Okay, I'm breaking up any sort of like big chunks. I want the soil to be really light and fluffy and aerated when I get my seeds into it. Making sure it's sort of evenly distributed so that all of the cups of your container have some soil. Okay, and one of the issues that I find with this particular arrangement is that my egg container is just a little bit too wide for my cake pan. Both things together don't really fit. So I usually trim the last two off of the end. You don't have to do it this way. This is just what happens to work for the materials that I had on hand. You are, of course, going to determine with the materials that you have on hand what makes the most sense for your situation. So I'm just going to do 2 trays side by side, and I'm going to lose the last 2 on the end. This might have been easier if I did it before I put the soil in, but sometimes you just gotta amend on the fly. It's all part of the gardening experience. Alright, so I've got my 2 trays, and I'm feeling pretty good about this right now. One of the things that I would suggest that you do, if your soil is not already pretty moist, is to pre-water the soil a bit. This way when you put your seeds in on the top, you're not going to immediately wash them away when you water your plants. Alright, up next, very scientific method here. I'm going to poke holes in the soil. Boop, 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 boop. Beep, 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 beep. Boop, 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 boop. Beep, 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 beep. Pop. Boop. There you go. That's the method. Got a little bit of extra water here. I'm just gonna drain that off the edge. This goes for seedlings, but this really goes for any plant. You never want them to be sitting in standing water. It can lead to root rot. So for this pack of seeds, I believe we have no idea. We have no idea how many seeds are in this package. It doesn't say. Sometimes they do. This one doesn't. But what the seedling pack does say, and there's usually a lot of great information on here. So, we are to sow seeds indoors, February or March. It will take us 7 to 14 days to germinate. That means the little seed becomes a boop, little tiny plant. You want to transplant outdoors into full sun in May or June. The mature height is going to be 5 to 7 feet. So we are definitely going to have to stake these guys in order to keep them from falling over. And from transplant to harvest is about 80 days. 80 days, so a little bit less than 3 months. So if I'm going to put these into the ground in about mid-May, so mid-June, mid-July, mid-August, I am expecting I'll have tomatoes to eat around August and September, probably. So my goal here is really just to put 1 or 2 seeds in each hole that we just created. If you put more than 1 or 2, I mean, you can, you're likely to get, you know, it's possible that you just get a lot of germination and then you have to thin them out later, which is totally fine. There were not that many seeds in this package, so I'm just going to plant them all out in this tray and hope that I don't kill them. And that's basically it. I'm going to lightly cover up the seeds with some soil. If you're planting along with me and you pre-moisten your soil, you won't need to immediately water them in, but you're definitely going to want to check on them every day to make sure that they're still getting enough light, enough moisture. Okay, and that's it. This is ready for growing. The thing about tomatoes really is that they're not cold hardy at all. So in order to get these to germinate, they need to be in a place that is warm, that's going to get a lot of light. So if you have a really sunny window in your house, a south-facing or west-facing window, that would be a good place to put these. I live in an English basement apartment, so I don't, and my main windows are actually north and east facing, so I don't have a ton of natural light, so I'm going to supplement with some grow lights. If you're growing in a basement or a garage, or you've got some sort of cold storage, or if you have some sort of outdoor cold frame where you're starting these but it's not getting a ton of sun, you might want to supplement with some plant lights as well. I don't have any particular brand that I recommend. I mean, I could definitely link some below, but you know, whatever your hardware store carries, I'm sure is fine. I have used plant light bulbs to supplement the light inside my apartment for all of my house plants as well throughout the winter, and they work pretty well, so I'm pretty satisfied with that brand. So I'll see if I can find them and I'll link them below. Alright, let's do a close-up of our seeds. Use the top part of your cake pan as a dome to increase the humidity if the inside of your house is really dry, or if you notice that your egg carton planter pots are drying out really quickly, you can sort of put the dome over it and help to keep in some of the moisture. You're going to want to make sure that if you're using your cake topper dome to help keep moisture in, that you're checking that it's still got some ventilation. You don't want it to get too wet inside. You don't want it to keep too much moisture inside so that the seeds will rot and the roots will rot. So it's a fine balance between keeping them moist enough that the seeds can generate and sprout, and giving them the ability to, giving the soil the ability to dry out in between waterings, so that you're not getting any issues, that you're not having any issues with it being too wet. Wow, that was so hard to say. Okay, let's go inside. This is my indoor seed starting setup. You can see I've got plant lights going and the egg carton planters that we're using. This is the Ozark pink tomato from Southern Exposure. I also have some hot peppers starting and some basil that's already started to sprout. You can see those little cute sprouts. In the pan next to it, there's some sweet bell peppers that really haven't taken off yet. And next is the Brandywine heirloom tomato that we planted today together. And next to that, I have some regular Roma tomatoes. And these I planted out last week, so you can actually see that these have already begun to sprout. Let's see if I can get a closer look in there for you. Yeah, and this is our seed starting setup. So we'll just have these lights, keeping everything together. And thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please hit that subscribe button and follow along our journey.